Hello,
everyone. We're going to begin in a minute or two, just allowing people to join before we get going. Thank you. Happy Tuesday, everyone. My name is Carlos Moncada. I'm Director of Client Services at InfoReady. Thanks for taking the time to join our webinar today. It's a peer spotlight webinar with panelist Dr. Karen Markin from the University of Rhode Island. She's the Director of Research Development Services there. She's going to be telling her story and URI story about managing the seed money program and how they use it so effectively to help with faculty and institutional growth and development and research. And so a few logistical items before we get going. First, this webinar is scheduled for 60 minutes. The presentation will take about 20 minutes or so, and then the remainder of the time will be Q&A with Dr. Markin. All of the phones are muted, and if you have a question, please use the Q&A option to submit those questions. We also received questions in advance during registration, so we'll bring those up during Q&A. There are also a few poll questions and a post-webinar survey. Poll questions will pop up throughout. You may have already seen the first poll question when you logged in to the webinar. The survey will appear in your browser when you leave the webinar. So if you'd be so kind, please respond to those. If you don't want to, that's okay as well. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available in a week or so. We like to edit little parts out, like the beginning of us waiting to launch the webinar. And then we'll send that out, and you can even email us to request it as well. Now, with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Karen Markin. Karen, your show.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk today about how our use of InfoReady is leading to faculty and institutional success. The next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the University of Rhode Island. We are a land grant university established in 1892. We're also a Sea Grant institution. Our colleges are arts and sciences, environmental and life sciences, nursing, oceanography, business, engineering, pharmacy, and professional and continuing education. We are a high research activity institution, and in fiscal 21, we had $110 million in extramural grants. That is a record high for us, and so we're very proud of that. Okay, next, please. And to give you a picture of the kind of work we do, our top funders, let's see, last time it was U.S. Department of Commerce. That was a NOAA grant to Bob Ballard, the Intrepid Explorer, some of you may have heard of. We got 15.4 million for his Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute. But normally our top funder is the National Science Foundation, followed by the National Institutes of Health. Okay, next. We are also inordinately fond of our football team. I know many of you are probably at schools that are in big name conferences, and you may not have even known that Rhode Island has a football team. However, they won the Governor's Cup for the third time in a row. It's a state competition, and Rhode Island beat Brown by 45-24, and that was an away game for us. So go Rhody. Next. Okay, but back to the research enterprise, and that's something that we have wanted to grow for quite a while. And our new vice president for research came in 2018, and he was committed to increasing both our external funding and also streamlining procedures. So what that meant for my office, research development, is that he wanted to ramp up some longstanding internal grant programs that had been supported primarily with state funding, and also update our management of those programs. And that's where InfoReady came in. Okay, next, please. Okay, so now I'll tell you a little bit about those seed money programs. If you could call a grant program a sleepy little program, that would describe these. They're listed in the university manual. They have been there for decades, and they've received modest state funding, about the same amount year after year after year. One of them is proposal development. Now that's the seed money program that allows investigators to do summer work to collect pilot data for an external proposal. It's got two main goals. One is to improve the PI's grant writing skills. It's an in-house grant, and giving them a chance to give it a try before they go to an outside agency. The project is also supposed to result in a proposal to an extramural agency. So that's the institutional benefit. The companion program is called Career Enhancement, and that funds projects for which there is little outside support. Those are grants to humanities professors to travel to archives, artists to put on exhibitions or create the works that are in exhibitions. Okay, next. Okay, but this new vice president saw a lot of potential, especially in the proposal development program, to use it for growth of the research enterprise. And he did several things to ramp that up. We had been getting about 67K from the state, and previous VPs would throw in a little bit, so we'd be maybe in the 80s for that year. He put in like 133K, so this was a head turner for a lot of our scientists. He also increased the maximum size of the award a faculty member could get from 15K to 25K. That was another head turner, because I know if you're working with a lot of PIs in science, at 15K doesn't go a long way. So you have a grad student in your lab, and you're eating that up very quickly. So this was a game changer. That alone started to attract more interest. Okay, and the vice president also was going to address these procedural shortcomings we had. Okay, next, please. Oh, okay. So this was the bad old days. There were some key problems with the way we did things before. The investigators were unhappy with the review process. Even though this was supposed to help them learn to be better grant writers, it wasn't, because they weren't getting very many useful comments that they could use for revisions. The way it worked is we had a standing committee that reviewed these, and before we had InfoReady, they basically write up some comments. They'd read the proposal, write up an email, then dash it off. And the result was, just, a few cryptic comments that the PI couldn't tell possibly what they could have done differently to get the money. This resulted in many frustrated investigators who, of course, called me to vent their frustration. So I was acutely familiar with this review problem. The other issue was that the institutional benefits were not clear. Although we got reports at the end of the project, we never followed up to find out whether those extramural proposals were ever funded. So even though people assumed we were getting a benefit, that it was bringing in money, we couldn't document it. And InfoReady is helping us to address both of these issues. Okay, next, please. So the review process, first of all, which I deal with a lot, was greatly improved once we got InfoReady. And I will say the vice president didn't need a lot of persuading. He wonderfully for me, he saw the value in this. And so a key change was modifying the review process. The vice president met with the committee and impressed upon them that he was putting more money in, and he wanted this. He knew about the review issues and he wanted this to run better. And so he was doing his part, putting this additional funding in, but they were going to need to help out too. It's helping these PIs to see what could they do differently, how could they make their proposal better. So they came up with a detailed review process. They had 12 criteria, a comments and rating combination, which if you're using InfoReady, you know what that is. When they first presented it to me, I was baffled as to how I would handle the fact that they gave different weights to different criteria. But InfoReady helped me out. And so we changed that scale, the rating scale. Some questions were 5, 1 to 5, or up to 10 or 15. So that's how we handled the weighting. So there was also, of course, if you use this product, there's space for comments for each criterion. And so the vice president says, we've got this new way of doing it. Please write comments so the PIs know what to do. Because he knew too that if the PIs were unhappy, he'd hear about it too. And, he wanted this to help them. Okay, next. So, okay, here's just an example of one of our review criteria. Does it provide a clear description of the work proposed? And that was a 10-point scale. And so, of course, the reviewers had to write something there. They couldn't just blow it off. When we were before, if they had a few questions, they would not necessarily address all the issues. This way, they had to. It was very helpful. Next. Okay. Oh, the other thing that helped us greatly, this was a real time saver for everybody involved. It's almost embarrassing to admit, but though several years ago, when we were still doing this without InfoReady, we were still using like a PDF that they were emailing around and getting digital signatures on, which was a real pain in the neck. And then they'd scan it in to create this PDF package that they then submit. Very error prone. I mean, pages can stick together when they're scanning things, all around, a hassle. So now we have this very slick process where we, dean's office, department chair, reviewer ratings, and vice president who gives the final okay. And really, everyone's very happy with this. Yeah, I don't get gripes about, sometimes you introduce a new, a new software or procedure and people gripe. No, that hasn't happened in this case. Okay, next, please. All right, so that pretty much covers our, procedures of streamlining our procedures with InfoReady. The next issue was that the VP wanted to determine what kind of return on investment we were getting from this seed money program. Now, as I said previously, we were receiving a final report at the end of the grant year. But as you know, if you're working in research development, that's really too early to know whether a grant was funded. That's basically just enough time for them to collect the data and prepare a proposal. So that when we get a report, it say, we did this and that in the lab, and then we sent our proposal to NSF or wherever it may be. So the vice president wanted to look back and see how we had done on previous proposals supported with this program. So we began with seven years of previous awards, because we did, of course, have those final reports. Okay, next slide, please. And as you can imagine, this was a very labor-intensive process. I had the written reports that I read through 7 years worth of those, and looked to see what proposals had been submitted. Then, because you can't really tell from a title in a proposal, whatever happened, I couldn't possibly look at our own database and surmise whether they matched up. So I had to survey those awardees. I think I used Google Forms, one of those products, to ask them about what happened after they submitted that. And they got back to me because they knew this was about possibly getting more money in the program. So it wasn't too hard to get responses. And so they let me know, where the proposal went and how much money there was. And I was also able to verify those grants in the university's award database. I can say, okay, oh yes, we got this award from NSF in this year. So we knew we had, accurate information on that front. Okay, next slide, please. And what we found is that it paid off big time. It showed out an enormous return on investment. Now, I had help with this. I'm not an Excel expert. So on the left, the scale is for the bars that show the seed money that was dispersed. And on the right, the scale is for the line that shows the cumulative extramural awards we received. So needless to say, the vice president was thrilled to find this out, to have the ability to document this for himself and for others. Okay, next slide, please. So, now that we can document the return on investment, what I plan to do is use the features in the progress report function to collect better data on the results of the grants. One thing I like is that report form, I can specify exactly the information I want to collect. Before we sent them a letter saying, please discuss X, Y, and Z. And how sometimes people will, leave something out. And so this way I can say grants submitted, articles you published, conference presentations, I can, lay that all out and get answers to the questions that we want responses to. Also, I am going to be able to much more easily follow up at 1 year intervals. I'm wanting to do 2 and 3 year reports because, as that's how long it can take to find out whether something was funded from an outside agency. Might be year 2, it could even be year 3 if they got to revise and resubmit, which is not all that uncommon. And this way I can also track the results of our career enhancement projects, which, with the books and exhibitions, those tend to be more long-term. In those final reports, they'd say something like, Okay, yes, I traveled to the archives in Paris and I got the information I needed, and then I came back and I wrote chapter 7. So we know they made good progress on the book project, but we don't really know how it came out. So the bottom line to this streamlining of the process really was, well, in addition to the accuracy, research development, I can spend more time helping faculty finding funding sources or writing competitive proposals, and less time on administrative chores that are not particularly productive. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now that we have the data, we're hoping to grow those projects and our research portfolio. The vice president, he can takes this. I know I get asked, every year at a certain time for the information. It goes to the board of trustees or the president and others talking about this seed program's return on investment. And it's a powerful argument for additional funding, I think, for that program. And also it's going to be, as I mentioned, better tracking for that career enhancement program. Even though those projects don't bring in a lot of money, they are reputation enhancers for the university, books, exhibitions, things like that. For example, just last week, I went to an exhibition at the Newport Art Museum. One of our photography professors has an installation there. And the installation, she was partly funded by one of our grants. And so, now our marketing and communications office knows about it, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have it in our research magazine. So being able to track things like that, this I just happened to know about because the artist contacted me because she was grateful for the grant. But I don't always hear about these things. So this way we'll be able to track it and then to publicize it. Okay, so next slide, please. That pretty much covers what I plan to say. So I'm ready for questions.
Karen, thanks so much
Sure.
for sharing your experience and all that information with everyone on the webinar. Also, congrats on the record extramural funding.
Oh yeah, we're very pleased. Yeah, thanks.
That's it's wonderful to hear, especially because everything's getting more competitive, right?
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
So let's dive into these questions. I know you're ready.
Yes.
So the first question involves faculty eligibility. And it's how many faculty are eligible for these grant programs, approximately?
I don't know the number, but the criterion is you need to be tenure track, or well, not just tenure track, or you can be a research scientist. That's a separate category we have, but they need to be in a full-time continuing position with the university. So yes, so that's hundreds of faculty, and yes, there aren't that many awards. It is highly competitive. Yes, that we would like to have it be not quite so competitive, because I would say that even though we try to help them prepare a more competitive proposal, sometimes, we get more good projects than we can fund. In fact, probably every year, there are more good projects than can possibly be funded. And so they end up having to split hairs, or sometimes they give preference to the untenured faculty, to give them a little boost towards getting tenure. But yeah, you're right. It's a super competitive program.
Great. Yeah, it will meaning there's tons of applications. So having
tons of applications compared to the amount of money, even with the increased money available. That just spurred more interest, and it was good. We got more applications, but that meant like the competitiveness stayed the same, sort of, instead of making it a little easier for somebody to get a grant. Yeah.
Well, and so, that inevitably leads to more reviewers and more reviews needed, and
Oh yeah, the benefit. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
the benefit of having this product so that I can just, yeah, it's not that hard to add reviewers or whatever.
And related to that, we actually have some questions about the review process that have come in.
Oh, okay.
The first one asks, what kind of approval are you requesting at the deans and chair phase? What is the VPR approval like? Is it actual ratings or an approve and deny?
Okay. So the deans and department chairs, the reason we have them sign off, it's really just an approve or turn down. And that's primarily because the projects can involve summer recontracting. And we want to give those business offices a heads up that there could be summer recontracting. They don't know, they do not assess the scientific or scholarly merit of the project. It's simply, signing off in that regard. In rare cases when we've had somebody who was technically eligible, but would be leaving the university shortly thereafter, and the dean has not approved it. But primarily it's about, letting them know about the summer recontracting. Oh, and I don't remember, was the second part of, the vice president. Yeah, the vice president is simply, he just approves or declines. He's the final say. And actually he hasn't rejected them. What he's done in some cases is there's been a project that was just on the edge of getting funding, and he's decided to, find a little extra money and go ahead and fund it. So yeah, he just wants to see, it's coming out of his budget, so he wants to see an overview of what's going to be going out.
So it sounds like a little bit of visibility and info ready for him to just do his last bit of due diligence.
That exactly, yeah, and he's just thumbs up, thumbs down, yeah.
We have a few more questions about reviewers in the review process.
Okay.
First, the question asks, can you talk more about weighted review questions? Are you totaling the score for all questions and determining the winners based on this score?
Yes, it calculates a final score. They get a number for each criterion, and then it's weighted, certain, okay, you can only get 5 points for this, you can get 15 points for that. So there is a total score, but this isn't done purely on those scores. I mean, there's a committee meeting and they look at, and they discuss it, and if there's a lot of big dispersion, a lot of standard deviations. This one gave it a high rating, this one gave it a low rating. They talk about it. It pretty, if you look at the way the scores got, there are some that are so high, everybody agrees, and there are some that are just, they're not ready yet. And then there's that group in the middle, and that's usually where they talk. And that's where the discussion is important, because you'll have very, very small differences, like, I don't know, like a decimal point worth of difference. So yeah, there's a lot of discussion. So it's not purely just, oh, if you get a score above this number, you're in. There's a lot of discussion among the committee members.
And related to the scoring, although it's not the final determining factor, but sometimes you have more reviewers scoring one application than another. So how do you handle those situations? They
assign, they try to control for that. They assign, I don't remember if it was two reviewers. If they don't have one, they put somebody else on it. They try to have the same number of reviewers, and then they look at how those reviewers compared with each other. So they're not, that won't harm a person. And if there's great disagreement between the two, they get a third reviewer to weigh in, and then they talk about it.
Oh, that's great. So there's always someone there providing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes.
And we also have, speaking of reviewers, we have a couple questions about reviewer selection. So the first is, how are reviewers for seed grant program selected?
Okay, there's a committee, I think there are 5 of them. And they all do some, and then they ask faculty they know, and something that's worked out great that they did last year and they're going to keep doing is previous awardees, because they kind of feel obligated to do it since they got an award. And so they recruit, they look at how many proposals have come in, and then they recruit. And yes, this is a labor intensive process. Takes a lot of reviewers to get through these proposals. Yes. So yeah, we've got a lot of volunteer work going on there, but and they try to, it's not easy, but they try to get somebody, generally speaking, familiar with the field, so that that they have some sense of, how this, if the proposal is sound. All proposals are supposed to be written for a general audience, but it still helps to have a subject matter, somebody familiar with the subject matter.
And I'm going to plug a best practice that admins have shared with me in the past. On the application form, you can enable an acknowledgement statement at the end of the form and put in terms and conditions there. And what I've heard many admins say they do is in those terms and conditions say that if you're awarded these funds, then you're agreeing to be a reviewer at some point in the future.
Well, that's a great idea. I mean, we do have one of those acknowledgements for the reviewers about conflict of interest, but we didn't think of that for the applicants. That's an excellent one.
Yeah, it definitely helps grow the reviewer pool, I think.
Yes.
And gets them committed. There are a couple more questions about reviewer selection. So this question asks whether the review committee is faculty only, or and how they rotate on and off.
Yeah, yes. Well, I think we have had a research scientist on it too. Those are, they're full-time employees, but they're primarily doing research. They're not a tenure track faculty member. Let's see, and the review committee, it's our committee on research and creative activities. It's a committee controlled by the faculty senate. It's in the manual. And I don't recall how they select those people, but they are the ones who appoint this committee. So that's how we get the committee members who review these, and then those people go out and recruit additional people. And we're going to start recruiting past award winners to help with that.
Thanks, Karen. Really appreciate it. Now, we've spoken a lot about reviewers and the review process. Let's switch gears a little bit. So this question asks about determining what you want to fund. And I phrase that oddly, but I'll just ask the question. Quote, how do you determine whether an external proposal is related closely enough to the seed funding to count it in your metrics?
We have the awardee tell us that. That's why I couldn't figure that out on my own, because they'll have some working title in the proposal, and that's why I decided to survey them, because I'd look at what was in the proposal, and then I'd look like in our university award database, or even on an agency data, like NSF or whatever, and there could be a similar title, but I couldn't determine, is that the one that came from the seed money? So we ask them, we say, we gave you this grant in, this year for this project. What happened with that? Was it funded? And then they tell us. So it's from them.
And we just got a question related to that survey. What are some of the questions you asked on the survey?
Oh, yeah, that's hard to remember. I think I was asking primarily about the, you got an award in this year and you said you'd submit a proposal. And let's see, yeah, your report said you'd do these things. What did you do? Did you have any, awards? I think we may have followed up with articles too. But we're basically when I go to I'm not going to do that kind of survey anymore. I'm going to use the progress reports, and we're going to ask for, scholarly products like conference presentations, articles, books, things like that.
All the common questions.
Right. Yeah, or what, because the program, usually has these grant programs. They're intended to fund certain things. So you want to find out, well, did they, carry out the program goals?
Yeah, you definitely want to know that, don't you?
Yes, and basically that's what you're looking for. So whatever it was that they were supposed to be preparing, did they do it?
Yep, 100% on that. We've got another question. It's a multi-parter about applying, and then we'll switch gears on topic. Do you have limitations on how frequently people may apply? This person says they're in the middle of a major assessment of their seed grants, and they'd like to learn more about your assessment process, including how you decided what criteria you were asking of awardees and how you followed up. What about people who left the university in the interim?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Applying, they can apply, well, they can't apply to both programs in the same year. They can apply every year, but they can only get an award once every 3 years. So if you get one, you have to wait, somebody else gets in. And as far as, was that a question about what are the review criteria?
Yes. So it was the assessment about how you decide which criteria you were asking awardees and how you followed up. The committee came up with the assessment. They came up with all those questions so that's how they want to evaluate them. And in terms of follow-up, we're following up on whatever they said they were going to do in that funded proposal. And do you follow up with individuals who left the university?
Let's see. I found only an instance of one person who left without submitting a proposal. I mean, in all the other cases, people, they got the grant money and they submitted their final report. They did what they were required to do. But actually, in more than a handful of cases, that used the excellent work that was funded by that to get a job somewhere else. So yes, some people use it as a springboard to find another job, but there's nothing we can do about that. And certainly plenty of them have stayed here. I mean, there are a number of people who got one of these seed money grants when they're brand new, and they go out and get, an extramural grant, and then they build from there, and they build an entire research career that serves as the jumping off point for, an entire research program. It's really been I can think of several people I've worked with who have had that experience. They started out with this program and, they are now established researchers in their fields. So yeah, for the most part, we're getting a lot of, it's a good investment in faculty who stay, but yes, some do leave.
But it sounds like the majority of
yeah,
faculty you invest in stay with the university and build their career.
That's right.
That's always great for the institution. Um, Now, switching gears a little bit, there's some questions about who's using InfoReady and how they're using it. So the first question is, do other offices at URI use InfoReady, or is that a future consideration?
Oh, yes. I mean, we've been trying to encourage other offices to use it. The graduate school is another very active user of this product because they have a lot of programs. They have, dissertation funding programs. They have fellowship programs. I think they had a travel money program. If you were going to a conference, you could put in for travel money. So they use it for a lot of things, and they run things a couple of cycles a year, maybe, and then year after year. Another program that uses it is there. We have an Office of Undergraduate Research and Innovation, and they do 2 cycles a year of mini grants for students, research grants. They use it. The Center for Humanities uses it. They've got a couple of grant cycles. Who else? Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head that are active users.
Oh, you've got quite a few different groups using the system. How do you
Yeah.
interact with them? How do you manage the relationship and the number of administrator seats in the system?
Let's see. Well, after we first got InfoReady, we went around to offices that I knew did grant programs, and who I perceived would have a use for it, and promoted it. And I work a lot with the Center for Humanities, and so I strongly urged them to get on it. And I used to work with the undergrad program, and I thought this is going to really make your life easier. Then grad school just jumped on right away. I gave the grad school, they figured it out on their own. I think InfoReady did a training for them, and then they were off and on working with it. And the other 2, I kind of went out and helped them, did a walkthrough, and then they're running with it. We haven't, I think we still have some seats available. We're continuing to promote it to other offices. And I know some offices that could probably use it. I think slowed down a little bit with the working at home last year, but I think we can start that again, promoting it.
And there's it's great to hear. And someone asked just asked a very pertinent question. Is the cost shared? Are they sharing in the cost?
Oh, yes. Primarily, the 2 entities that are using it are the Division of Academic Affairs and the Division of Research and Economic Development, and they split it. I don't recall what the proportion is, but yes, it's split. That was kind of why we went out recruiting other places, was to get other offices to help pay for it. And I'm going to continue that, looking at other offices.
Yeah, it's always a tough request, but it has to be done.
Yeah.
And there was another part to the same question, but you answered it. And the question was, did the other offices begin using it after VPR implemented InfoReady? And the answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Here's a question about other ways you're using InfoReady. Question is, do you use InfoReady to manage your limited submissions at all?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Our office uses it for a lot of things. Yeah. That's one of the things we use it for. And I'm so happy we have that, because those have burgeoned. I counted there's at least 26 of those a year. As any of you working in research development know, it's more and more common to have those limited competitions. And I mean, this is a wonderful tool for keeping track. I mean, we used to have them email me, and I was like always concerned, oh gosh, I'm going to miss an email or lose track of an email. And, I'm going to forget somebody apply, it's really difficult to keep track of things. And there were so many of them. This is a great place where we track everything. People submit, we don't lose track that they submitted, and then we can get it reviewed all in this one system.
It definitely helps with that administrative effort. And we actually have a question about that. By the way, people listening in, I swear I did not prompt her for that segue into this question. And here's the question. Might you be able to provide an estimate of the amount of staff time your office has saved since switching to InfraReady? For instance, from two people working on the internal funding programs nearly full time for 2 months of the year to one person working on it at 30% effort. That's just an example to provide context.
It's hard for me to do a quantitative estimate on that, but let's just say I haven't had to pull in, we had an administrative assistant who during application season, was very busy. Yeah, we used to have to, for example, make a spreadsheet, the proposals that would come in. This person would have to literally type into an Excel spreadsheet, the title, the PI, the college, the amount. I mean, all that stuff, very, very labor intensive. Now we can just, download a report. Yeah, let's see, there's initial effort in setting up like this, like the seed money program. They may tweak this a little bit from year to year, but pretty much once it's set up, the work is done. I don't have to put a lot of additional effort into that. Yeah, so once it's set up, there's just a lot less work. I can't come up with a percentage, but for one, we do not have the administrative assistant, like, putting in a lot of, then back in the day, there were paper copies and those were filed, but we're way past that. But yeah, just suffice it to say, it was a great deal of staff time previously.
And so a follow-up question to that, what are you doing with the newfound staff time?
I'm sorry, with the what?
With the newfound staff time.
We can do our real job. Help PIs instead of, when I was doing that stuff, I always felt that I was being pulled away from my core duties, which would be to be helping investigators. Instead, doing Excel spreadsheets and, things like that. It's frustrating and it's not productive to research development. So, now we can do the things that we're here to do, basically.
And this one's actually mine, out of curiosity. When you were doing those administrative things, did those efforts fall on to the researchers and faculty members themselves?
I'm not sure I understand it.
Well, like finding funding opportunities and things like that, were they burdened more with that?
Oh yeah. Or, it just wasn't happening. So they could miss opportunities, or, maybe they wrote a proposal and maybe it wasn't as good as it could have been with some help. And, I can't measure that, but, there may have been things that didn't get written or didn't get funded because, we were paying attention to Excel spreadsheets and such.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. There's a few other questions about other types of processes. So the first is, have you used a seed type competition to develop IRGs for a center scale grant proposal, such as MRE, SEC, ERC, U01, etc.?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I'll ask that person to provide clarity, and we'll move on to another question. Excuse me. Here's another one for determining ROI. Do you consider any non-monetary factors in determining the ROI? For example, the role the grant played in getting promotion and tenure?
Oh, certainly, we haven't measured that, but certainly, that's one of the goals of these programs is, the committee will often give preference, if it's a good proposal and, other things being equal, they'll often give preference to someone who's not tenured. I mean, we haven't been measuring that. But I know that was one of the initial rationales to have these programs is that we want to help. We've brought these people in, we've given them tenure track jobs, and now we got to help them, achieve tenure. So that, and then, right, let's see. Yeah, we try to keep track of what people have done in career enhancement. As I said earlier, that, I mean, we can't really quantify that. But I mean, I've been able to tell, like, we've, X number of books have been published as a result of this, or articles. I mean, certainly we can report on the achievements of the faculty who have received those. I think the tracking the proposal, seed proposals, and then the external grants. I mean, that's a powerful way to, make a justification for additional funding. But I mean, that's not by any means the only payoff of these programs, but that's a way to make an argument for additional funding.
In a question about those programs and the number of applications. So how many applications do you receive for each program? Was there an increase in applications with the increase in VPR funding?
Yeah, I think we may have gotten, I'm not sure, I didn't check, close to 40 for, when there was more money, it bumped way up, which to me, I was a little concerned. I mean, I was glad we had the money, but I was hoping that it wouldn't be quite as competitive, because I was bummed every year when people would get put in these good proposals and they didn't get funding, and they're asking me, what could I have done? And I'm there, well, not much. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just there wasn't enough money, and they're splitting hairs. I mean, everybody who works in research development knows that goes on at the agencies too, that there's generally a lot more good work than there is money to fund it. So yeah, and we only give maybe 7 awards per program, 7 to 10. So it's a very competitive. Yeah, it's a pretty low award rate, and it's very competitive. But the other thing is, it's not a big proposal either. I think the narrative is about 3 pages, and then the budget is a page, and then it's a 2-page CV. So it is not a great investment of time. So I mean, that makes it a little easier to apply, even though it's very competitive, but you're not sinking a lot of time into it.
Thanks, Karen. There was a second part to that question. Can any of the increased number of applications be attributed to instituting InfoReady on campus? I'm guessing the money, more money, was a bigger incentive.
Yeah. I'm not sure about that, but I certainly don't think it was a hindrance. I mean, so many people now are so used to doing things, with an online product like this, it makes it pretty easy. So it may have helped, and it certainly has not hurt. I don't know how much I could attribute to this. Right. Because the money was certainly a big reason.
Yeah, definitely. The top dollar amount increased by 2/3.
Yeah, quite a bit. So yes, and as I said, that for the scientists, some of them thought the other amounts were just too small for them to get much work done, but that changed their minds.
The person with the question about large center grants provided a little more information. So here we go. And I think that might be the last question we
Okay,
ask as well. Might be able to squeeze one more in after that. So these large center grants require 2 to 3 interdisciplinary research groups, IRGs, of
okay,
4 to 8 faculty each. The best center grants are derived from an internal competition to decide what the strongest IRGs can be on campus. I thought that you had given seed funding to groups of faculty to form ideas that serve as the core of an IRG.
yeah, they aren't using it that way. That is a really good idea. I have promoted it to, we do have a center group that could use this product, and they're not, I don't know why they're not, but they're not. Yeah, I think that is a good thing for us to continue to promote, but nobody's using it here like that now. I'm not sure, maybe if I've made the value of it clear to those people, but yeah, that's a good thing for us to work on.
Thank you, Karen. I think we have a couple quick questions that we can.
Okay.
One, how big is your RD office?
It's just 2 people now. We previously had more, but we are, for various reasons, we're down to 2 people.
Well, all the more power to you.
That's why we love having a labor saving system like InfoReady.
That's great to hear that we've been able to help you
Yeah.
with that. The other question here, this goes back to reviewers and committees. Do you offer incentives to reviewers and your advisory committee?
We have talked about that. No, we don't. I have urged, well, I think they come to the holiday party, but aside from that, no, not really. It's put to them as this is, an important part of your service to the university. No, we don't have incentives, but I am going to pick up on this idea of, yes, the previous awardees giving back. I think that's a really good way to frame it.
Yeah, absolutely. That gotta use all the different buttons you can to incentivize them.
Yes, indeed.
So I think, we have 4 minutes left. I'm going to get one quick question in that relates to something you brought up before. What did you do to train faculty on InfoReady?
Oh, it really not much of anything. It's pretty intuitive for them. If they've applied at NSF or wherever, or used, our system to system grant portal, they pretty much figure it out. I didn't really get a lot of questions. I mean, the only issue we had was sometimes to sign in, people would use an alias email instead of their official email, and it wouldn't work. But once we sorted that out, I mean, it worked fine, and we really didn't have any questions. No, they didn't really need training. The only people that needed training were or an introduction were the new offices that we were encouraging to use InfoReady. We needed to show them what it did and how it would make their lives easier and get them started. But if people are already running a grant competition, it's pretty intuitive. I've worked with maybe somebody who didn't normally do grant competition, so it was a little more complicated for them because, like, the things you ask for and the different components, it wasn't clear to them, or it wasn't second nature. But anybody who does, is in the grants world, it was pretty simple.
All right. Well, Karen, we're Thank you so much for your time today. We're approaching the end of the hour here. Really appreciate you
Okay.
sharing your story and how you're using InfoReady with the folks on the call. Karen's contact info is on the screen here if you'd like to reach out to her. We've got a very collegial community of administrators that help each other out quite a bit. That leads me to this pitch for the listserv. I just shared a poll question for that and people replied. So it's a great place to ask questions for the broader group of admins if you wanted to know how to use the system in any way or get some feedback. If you responded yes to the poll question, we'll add you. If any of you are using InfoReady and have colleagues at other institutions that may benefit, we do have a referral program. If they get InfoReady, there's discounts available to both of you. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, if you do have any other questions for InfoReady, there's my colleague, Max Dinerman, his contact info is on the screen. Mine is as well. If you're already using InfoReady, if you have questions for the support team, that's support@inforeadycorp.com. And we'd be glad to answer anything you want to know about InfoReady. So with that, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone.